You know, right? Yeah, thank
Sherry's
you.
candy jar.
I can.
Okay.
Any candy?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
We're good.
That was, but it was.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call this
Gonna text.
Thursday, May 4th, 2023 Committee of the Whole Meeting Administration to order. Begin with a roll call. Rod Riley is here. Ryan Curry is going to be absent tonight. Brian Schneider.
Here.
Dave Wiltsey.
Here.
Ray Larson.
Here.
Brett Mueller.
Here.
Tom Wahlberg.
Here.
Alyssa Patterson.
Here.
Dana Logston.
Here.
Sherry Branson.
Here.
Carl Johnson.
Here.
Marion Thornberry.
Here.
All right, very good. We don't have any minutes tonight, right? Nope. Approval of the agenda. Someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda, please? So motion by Schneider, seconded by Mr. Mueller. Any discussion? Not all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public comment. I think I have one public comment for tonight. Dara Mogenis, step up, 3 minutes at the board here. State your name and your address for the record, please.
Good evening, Dara McGinnis, 10861 Spring Road, Garden Prairie, Illinois. Resident of Boone County. Can you hear me okay? I don't know if the mic's on, but I'll talk loud. I'm just here tonight to thank you for your time and effort into all the information you have to gather for the rodeos, animal shows here in Boone County. I'm hoping that you guys do not forget about the 4-H and FFA kids, any educational non-for-profit groups that we can potentially put some wording in for them to protect them from having to file for the animal permits. I do send out emails and I don't always get responses, so I just wanted to make sure I was here and saw faces, make sure that you heard what I was saying. The other thing I want to mention is that we've gone through the process, the group of us, other residents have been supporting us throughout all this. It's been months. We did bring this to the Spring Township Board and they overwhelmingly approved of our decisions to go through to committee. Committee overwhelmingly supported it to go through Zoning Board of Appeals. Zoning Board of Appeals then overwhelmingly supported and gave you information. So we've gone through the process. It's not just what we have said or wanted or thought should happen. We have gone through the different committees. The different committees have listened to us, asked questions, and responded by pushing through to the board what they thought would be best for the animal show situation that we have going on right now with the ordinance. So I just wanted to make sure that we all understood that, and that I had the chance to make sure that each one of you had a chance to read the email I sent on Monday in regards to one of the Boone County residents' email that she had sent to the building department and got some questions and answers from Diane and them. I think it's a wonderful letter for you to read. I think it comes from the heart of Boone County as she wrote it, and the response she got, I think, would be very educational for all of you. So again, because I don't get response from emails, nobody responds to my emails if they got them, if they read them. I just wanted to have a chance to make sure you guys heard me. So thank you again.
All right, thank you. That was the only one to fill out. Anyone else here for public comment? All right, we'll move along. Somebody want to grab the sheriff out of the hallway, please?
In the back.
Here, I'm sorry, Scott. Go right ahead. We'll have to start with monthly presentations. Boone County Sheriff.
Bring in the cavalry.
Here you go.
They're all on their phone. Come on, ladies and gentlemen.
Look at them here tonight. I figured they were here from Burn.
Right there is perfect. I'll slide.
Yeah, that would work too. Many of these individuals are very happy to be here tonight. I know you might have a long meeting, so some of them wanted to give a speech, but I'm not going to allow that. So. Sherry? Okay. Obviously, before I give my monthly presentation, I got a few individuals obviously behind me I want to honor. They honor you on this county board, and you honor them, represent them on this county board. We had a swearing in, a week and a half ago. And I mentioned at that, probably my top 5 things I get to do as a sheriff. And obviously swearing in young deputies, watching young deputies, which we have one, Mr. Peter Blair back there that just graduated. Obviously that would be in my top 5. And obviously tonight would probably be number 1. This is a great honor to stand before these individuals in front of their supervisors, if you want to say that, the individuals that represent them day and night, 24 hours, and the job that they do, I just can't say enough. They're all outstanding individuals. If I could bring all 125, 130 employees up here, I would. And maybe over my 4-year term, I will be able to do that. But tonight we're going to honor our patrol division, our dispatchers, a correctional officer, and also an individual from our records division. I'm going to read the letters that they were recognized with, their combination letters. And so it's a great honor for each of these individuals to be recognized tonight. And I'm going to start off first with Teresa L. Contera, division. She can step up here. They're shy. Get that. So this is a memo to recognize and commend the performance of Teresa of the Boone County Sheriff's Records Department. On 4/17, Boone County deputies were dispatched to the PSB for a report of sexual assault. The female victim did not speak English and came to the PSB alone. Teresa assisted by translating the patrol deputies and then assisting the victim interview with the detectives. Interviewing victims of sexual assaults require the interviewer to ask personal questions about very sensitive topics. Due to the amount of details needed for the investigation, these interviews can last very long. It puts a lot of mental and physical toll on the people involved. Over the course of over 3 hours, Teresa not only translated but provided emotional support to the female victim. I believe that her ability to speak Spanish and a genuine care about the victim made it less stressful for the victim and allowed the detectives to obtain more detailed information for the investigation. This resulted in an arrest warrant being issued for the offender. Teresa's compassion and knowledge of the Spanish and English language should be commended. I believe this is an example of how the Boone County Sheriff's Office as a whole works together to provide the best services for the citizens of Boone County. Respectively, Sergeant Dan Riley, he's the Sergeant of Investigations. So at this time, obviously these letters, well, we have a lot of people, so these letters will go in the file to each of these individuals. So at this time, I want to thank Teresa for the work that she does. Our records department is so underpaid for the work they do. I've approached them so many times throughout my career, and they've always been there to help me throughout my career. So at this time, I'd like to congratulate Teresa and thank her for her assistance. All right, next we have Correctional Officer Sherry Roach. She's the one that wanted to give a speech. So not going to be allowed to. I would like to formally recognize Correctional Officer Sherry Roach for the actions that she took during an incident involving a detainee on the morning of April 15, 2023. In summary, on April 15, 2023, at approximately 05:50 hours, CO Roach approached or was assigned to the intake post in the Boone County Adult Detention Facility. CO Roach was randomly scanning through the intake cameras and observed a detainee in the intake cell wrapping a blanket around her neck. CO Roach immediately responded to the cell door, observed the detainee had tied the blanket around her neck and that the detainee was trying to make the blanket tighter. CO Roach ordered the detainee and removed the blanket from the individual and also alerted her sergeant, Sergeant Whitehead, of what had occurred. Because of CO Roach's diligent awareness and quick response to her duties, she was able to prevent the detainee from serious injury or possible death. CO Roach's professionalism and actions are in the highest tradition of the Boone County Sheriff's Office. Respectfully, oh, he's in the back, he's not standing up. Sergeant Jared Lufbarl. So at this time, again, another group of individuals back in our corrections, and our Lieutenant Correctional Supervisor Jody's back there. Next week is actually Correctional Officers Week. So it'd be great for you individuals to reach out to our corrections officers, our division, and thank them for all that they give Boone County. That's a very, very, very difficult job. They do a lot. They handle a lot of different cases for all of us. And we can't thank enough for Jody, Jared, and our entire correctional officers that are back there. So on behalf of the Sheriff's Department and Correctional Officer Sherry Roach, we appreciate all her service. Thank you much. All right, next reference our dispatchers and our patrol units on behalf of the tornado. Lieutenant Kevin Smythe wrote this on behalf of the dispatchers. Again, dispatching, it's a very, very difficult job. And I think as county board members, definitely take some time to go in and visit with our dispatch center. What they do is it's amazing. Just to peek in the door and see what they actually do. There's a lot of us in this room or standing behind me today that would want no part of it. I've been in there several times throughout my career again, and I've seen when, it hits the fan, and these girls do turn on the light bulb, and they go from having a great conversation to, taking several 911 calls. And if you ever wanted to see whatever title or whatever rank I had throughout my career, do the moonwalk out of the dispatch center, that's when you see me. I kind of just disappear because really we can't help them. There's so much technology in what they do. You feel helpless that you can't help them at times because they got so much going on. So reference the tornado. This letter is to commend you the performances of telecommunicators, Barb Reeser, Teresa Nyman, Brittany Clark, and Jenny Frankowski for their efforts on the evening of Friday, March 31st, 2023. On this date, the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for all of Boone County at approximately 7:23 p.m. The Belvedere Boone County Communication Center immediately activated the tornado warning sirens. The first incoming calls reported heavy wind damage at approximately 7:44 p.m. in the area of Cherry Valley and Wheeler Road. It was confirmed that a tornado did touch down in this area of Cherry Valley and Wheeler Road. It was later confirmed that a second tornado had also touched down in Boone County in the area of Beloit and Dawson Lake Road. At approximately 7:45 p.m., the dispatch center received the first call reporting the roof collapse at the Apollo Theater, and there were people trapped inside under the debris. Subsequent to the initial call, and because of the potential mass casualties when dealing with this type of incident, the communication center immediately began to organize and dispatch multiple emergency response units and perform the general recall of officers, as well as handle other calls for services throughout the county and city, all while continuing to obtain and relay pertinent information to the responding units and the departments in a calm and professional manner. Numerous calls for service were reported for damaged property, downed trees, power lines, residential and business alarms, and traffic accidents. In all, and this is where it gets interesting, in all, the communication center handled 217 incoming calls and made another 86 outgoing calls. A total of 85 separate calls for service tickets were created. Now, this next sentence, I did not put any of this in there. Together, the telecommunicators, Reeser, Nyman, Clark, and Frankowski brought a combined 70 years. I did not put that in there. To the communication center. So I have more time than all of them, I guess, so I'm included with them. Because of this, they were able to work together as a team and navigate the work volume that is typically done, again, good numbers here, over a 24 to 48 hour period in over 4 hours. So think of that. what they did in 4 hours could be up to a 2-day event. So it's amazing what these young ladies did. The job of dispatcher, remember I said that one is dispatcher week. Haven't put in the big word telecommunicator week. Is very demanding and stressful. Not every individual can handle this type of job, and it takes special individual to remain calm during the critical incidents. I want to recognize the performance of the telecommunicators Reeser, Nyman, Clark, and Frankowski for their professionalism, organization, and their expedient efforts that they displayed. Their contributions during this tragic incident did not go unnoticed and they should be commended. Again, just trying to wrap things up here, but I can't say enough for what they did that night. Brittany was actually in on overtime, and then Teresa, which is the kind of way we work as first responders. Because if you heard the numbers of calls, they couldn't really call people. We have 4 chairs in dispatch, and there was an open seat, and Teresa just came in on her own. Obviously, yeah, if she responds and that seat's taken care of, then, she can move on or assist in other ways. But it just says a lot for her to respond without getting a call, just to assist Belvedere Boone County during that, volume of calls that we were getting. So at this time, I can't say enough for all the dispatchers. They do so much. They work so hard. They go unnoticed. And I appreciate all they do for Boone County and Belvedere. So thank you, ladies. Please sit down. Patrol's next. I don't want them to get any bigger heads than what they got. This letter is to commend the performance of Sergeant Nick Funk, Deputies Mike Gosnell, Keith Van Acker, Deputy Rhonda Moore, Deputy Luke Spradling for their efforts on Friday, March 31st, 2023. On March 31st, 2023, the Belvedere Boone County community was impacted by a tornado that swept through the county. At approximately 7:45 p.m., Boone County Dispatch was notified that a tornado struck the Apollo Theater in Belvedere, causing the roof to collapse on several concert goers inside. Without hesitation, Sergeant Nick Funk, Deputy Gosnell, Deputy Keith Van Acker, Deputy Rhonda Moore, and Deputy Luke Spradling responded to the scene. Upon arrival at the scene, they entered into the building, attempting to rescue victims, putting their own safety in jeopardy. Working in conjunction with the Belvedere officers and fire department, several victims were removed from the building and escorted outside to safety. Some worked with other responding agencies to triage and provide aid to the victims, while the others worked to secure the scene and prevent more casualties. Their quick response and heroic actions should be commended. Their bravery, selflessness, and willingness to sacrifice their own life in order to save others are not only inspirational, but are also qualities that make them a vital part of the Boone County Sheriff's Office. That was from Lieutenant Darren Rowe. I guess I didn't mention Lieutenant Kevin Smythe. Is he back? Oh, he's over there. So he's over there. Sorry, we only got so much room. Yeah, we're scattered all over the place. So again, it's these individuals behind us that really make us that are in white shirts tonight. They make us look good. We're a team. There's nothing up there. It doesn't matter what rank you are. We do have titles, but it really doesn't matter. Everybody comes in and does their job, and they do it so professional. And it's been like that for so many years. And we can't thank the county board for all that you have provided all these individuals throughout the years with training to get us to where we were at today. So we want to thank you. And again, I want to thank all of them for taking time out of their evening tonight to come up here and spend a half hour with me. I'm sure they enjoyed that. But besides that, again, to all the ladies and gentlemen that stand behind me and all of our 135 employees, I can't thank enough all of them for what they do for Boone County. So thank you.
And Sheriff, I'd just like to take a minute. I know you haven't gotten to your report yet, but something that was brought to my attention.
Almost in Sheriff Ernest territory, so let's rush this up.
I know. It was pointed out to me over the last couple of weeks. And when it comes to stuff like this, somebody always gets forgotten. And it's kind of totally on me for this one. Because I from where I come from in Marengo, fire rescue works together. The ambulance, the rescue squad, they all work together. So I just like to take a minute. I was hoping somebody was going to text me some names, but they didn't. I didn't hear from them this evening. So I just like to take a minute to recognize, and of course, they're not even a unit anymore. Lifeline Ambulance, the responders that came out that night did a phenomenal job. I totally forgot to invite them to the county board meeting last month, but they did a phenomenal job. I don't want them to think that they were forgotten and that we don't appreciate what they did. Belvedere now has their own ambulance and Lifeline has become elite now. So some of those employees no longer work there and some of them may not even work in Boone County again. But I'd be remiss if I didn't take just a minute to thank all those people from, at that time, it was still Lifeline Ambulance. And they did a fantastic job as well. So Sheriff, appreciate it, and all your staff as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody can go to work now. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, ladies. Have a good night. Thanks.
It is very. I know we are.
Now you can continue with your short report, Sheriff.
It is, actually, I did shorten it up because I knew I had all that. So, though we did have a very busy month of April. Obviously, I'll go over a few numbers here, the bad numbers. Obviously, now we're 5 months into our fiscal year. At the current time, patrol spent $109,000. So that's 47% of what is budgeted. We're currently still down 2 deputies, and we have 3 that are still on medical. Corrections, we have spent $106,000, which is currently 58% of what is budgeted. We're currently 7 unfilled positions. That came up from 6 because one of our deputies that we just swore in a week and a half ago, or I guess 2 weeks ago now, he came from corrections, so he's now on patrol. In dispatch, we have spent $65,000 in overtime, and that is 67% of what is budgeted. We still have the 1 unfilled position, and we still have 1 in FTO. So there's those great numbers. So our calls for service in the month of April was 2,219 calls. That's up almost 350 calls for services from April of 2022. Like I mentioned, the 1 young deputy, on April 14th, we graduated Deputy Blair and Deputy Stagey. They graduated from the Sauk Valley Police Academy. And with great honor, I stand up here and say that they graduated number 1 and number 2 in their class. So what an honor that is for us attending that graduation, knowing that your 2 deputies who they honored there were 1 and 2. On April 21st, we swore in 2 new deputies, Deputy Savine and Deputy Para. And they began on the 23rd of April, they began their 16-week training also at Sauk Valley College. Deputy Spradling, who was here, he was currently in the FTO program at that time. He just got off on Monday, I believe it was, and he began solo patrol last night. So that gets us 1 more extra body. But that leaves us currently with 3. We still have 3 in the FTO program. So we have 3 on medical, 2 short, 3 in the FTO program. So that kind of shows us the patrol side where we're at with those overtime numbers. The 1 call, I guess we did have 1 fatality. On April 22nd, we had a fatality on Beaver Valley Road, single car accident south of Squaw Prairie. Obviously, our accident reconstruction team was called out, and where I'm leading into that is, again, something that you guys and gals do for us. We had 3 reconstructionists attend the World Reconstruction Expo, which was held in Florida. It's held only every 8 years. There was individuals from 25 different countries that were at this, and over 1,200 accident reconstructionists. So what an honor it was to send 3 of our individuals down there. Again, I can brag about a lot of different things we have at the Sheriff's Department, but this ranks up there with one of the best groups that we have. Our accident reconstructionists are known throughout the Midwest. Sergeant Nick Funk that was here, he teaches classes, not only in the U.S., but he goes to other countries and teaches the class. So how fortunate we are to have an individual like that as part of our reconstruction team. He gets called from all over the United States on questions and assistance needed to put accidents together. So again, thanks to you and our training budget that allows us to send 3 individuals down to that. And they can't say enough. They got a lot of information out of that expo. So we lost Sergeant Dan Reed. He retired in April from the Boone County Sheriff's Department. So that obviously goes back to one of our open spots. We finally got into place just as of yesterday, our assistant director for the EMA. So Mike Lowe, who's a firefighter with District 2, he will be taking that assistant role as an EMA director with the Sheriff's Department. And I guess all the information for EMA and corrections is on board docs, so you can take a look at that. Obviously, EMA Emergency Management has a lot of information on there for you. And the final thing is our text 911. We finally activated that. So now we can, or you can, or they can, anybody can text in 911. So we got a system now that'll work with a text if a text comes in for a 911 call. So with that, any questions? Sorry, it took so much time.
Any questions for the sheriff?
So look at that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, Highway Department, Justin.
Got my notes on board docs. Go through it really quickly. The bridge is on schedule. Poplar Grove Road Bridge is on schedule. I did want to touch on, we've got 2 bridges under construction, north-south route. I've had a lot of questions about that. We did notify, the Highway Department notified IDOT and multiple other agencies, including the village of Poplar Grove, about our detour plan back in November of 2021. So, we were, Boone County was proactive in our project through notifications through multiple agencies. So that our project is on schedule. We'll be getting our beams in May 18th to be set on the bridge. So things are progressing. The MFT Township Bridge Fund that I came to the board with a couple of times, or the committee with a couple of times, that didn't get out of committee. So we're going to keep trying. Number 3, I just wanted to let the committee know that my intent is not to hire a intern this year, but I did talk to, there's a retired IDOT and a retired Winnebago County engineer. He's actually got a CDL as well. So a real good fit for us to bring in on a temporary basis, part-time basis. He's got his all of his benefits through retirement at IDOT. So it actually works out really well for Boone County. He can't through IMRF. He's not able to work 1,000 hours anyway. So, and it'll all be within our budget. So there'll be some help there. We've had a lot of projects go through that are requiring a lot of administrative. We've had a lot of funding, federal funding and state funding, and the paperwork is really, I'm not keeping my head above water in some cases. So he's real good at that too. So that's gonna be a help to the department. We've got 4 lettings scheduled for 11th, the 11th this month, so a week from today. So the next meeting, finance meeting, I'll be bringing those to the committee for review and hopefully approval of the low bidder. It's about 30,000 ton of asphalt. It's a pretty good one. We'll have some more coming up here the next month. It's about a little over 20 miles throughout the county. And I'll speak more about that when I present it next week. We've got multiple intersections that we're keeping an eye on with accidents and things we can do, working with townships and that sort of thing. So we're working on those and we'll keep doing improvements. Caledonia Township, we bid a salt shed for them. That was a couple months ago. We got the bid results in and we've awarded that contract. That's 100% Caledonia Township and they're just taking it from there. It was a real good price, actually. I was surprised. So we're going to help them put the floor. We're doing the floor and the walls ourselves and we'll get that done. Should have it up after. And the reason I want to bring this up is after this salt shed is done, we will have salt sheds in every township, and which is very nice because not only does that help make our process more efficient, but it also gives us buffers. So if we have salt prices go high, or if we have a tough winter, we have more capacity to store salt here locally. And so it gets us through, it's a larger buffer to get us through price changes and also weather changes too. So it's a real good, we're in a better position. Let's see here. Salt shed. There's a meeting, if you haven't seen it, there's a meeting a week from today regarding the US 20 State Street proposed improvements. I encourage anybody to attend that. The link is attached. I think you're supposed to pre-register to that. So if you go to the second page, there's a pre-registration just to give your email and that sort of thing. So I encourage any public members to attend that have some concerns or just want to see what's happening. It's the best of my knowledge that their intent is still to, so the last time we spoke on this, they were looking at basically 20 foot, two 12-foot lanes, both directions with a barrier curb and a barrier median in the center, preventing crossovers. So that limits access substantially. My understanding is with a separated 10 or 12 foot bike path. My understanding is they are going to try to work that bike path in by providing shoulders on the outside lanes, which is, I think, is really good for Boone County with our agricultural community. I'd hate to see, having 2 lanes with barrier curb and then have a implement that takes up more than 1 lane would shut down both lanes then. So at least if we have a shoulder, we should still be able to maintain another lane of traffic. So I think that was a very smart move. That was a change that was done through this type of interaction with that IDOT has. So again, if there's any other concerns, I know there's a lot of concerns with that barrier median still. So these are the times to present those concerns. The last item, we've had some equipment budgeted here. Last year, fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. Fiscal year 22, we actually bid it in late 21. We bid a motor grader in late 21. A CAT 1440 6-wheel drive motor grader was the low bidder in 21. With supply chain, it actually just arrived a couple weeks ago, or last week, I guess it was. It just arrived. Wait, no. I'm sorry, it just arrived yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call. And so we also have a truck that was FY22. FY23, we have a truck, a fully loaded tandem truck that we use for snowplow, plowing snow, salt removal, hauling materials. It's one of our primary pieces of equipment, just a rotational replacement process that we have. That truck, same kind of thing as supply chain has pushed it back, but that did get assembled. We haven't, it hasn't arrived yet, but it completed its assembly last week. And that one we do expect to arrive. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I would like to, I've very last minute, I brought these to county administration, and I wanted to just bring it to your attention and perhaps be considered for ARPA funds. These were all budgeted program funds. I believe the highway department's done a very good job of being fiscally responsible, getting grants for a lot of things. On the equipment side of things, it's very hard to get a grant. I tell you, the most effort I put into any grant while here at Boone County was to try to get, it was when the emissions was happening with Volkswagen. And Ken and I went into Chicago a couple of times to testify, and we went all out trying to get some funds for equipment replacement, and we weren't able to get anything. So if equipment replacement is something that essentially is very limited on funding. So it is my request that we use some ARPA funds for those. The total amount, we actually have a SAW attachment as well. So the total amount that I am requesting for ARPA would be $613,207. So I just wanted to, I guess, make my case on that. And I'm available for any questions.
Somebody have something? Wait, yeah, Justin, I was just going to mention, we have our meeting next week. It starts at 6, but anybody wants to get on this call with IDOT, make sure and do that. We'll try to, just try to wrap up whatever you have going on it, before our meeting starts. I know it's going to bleed one into the other, and I would encourage everybody. I've been on the phone with a couple of emails and texts back and forth with Justin over the last month. Reach out to your state legislators, let them know about this issue with this berm that's going to go. I call it a berm. What did you call the rise?
It's a barrier median.
Barrier medium.
Yeah, so it's a raised curb.
Yep. So this is something that not a lot of people. We've gotten letters on this over the last couple of years that the people out there are not happy about that. Study that. Get a hold of your state legislators in your area. Make sure that you express your opinion on this. Maybe some changes can be made. I know we're kind of late in the project, but I don't think these are any objections that haven't already been made. So with that, anybody else have any questions for Justin? All right, thank you. You know what, Mr. Larson, I'm sorry, this is an administration meeting. Why don't you take over from here? I apologize.
Okay, yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you. Onto the quarterly department presentations. State's Attorney presentation, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out a few things in the memo that I provided. I'm still looking for an attorney in my office. We've had an opening since January. We tried to advertise for a felony assistant and didn't get any resumes. We have opened that up to basically any level of an assistant state's attorney, and we'll rearrange duties in my office. We did get a few resumes, and we're having some interviews next week. So we'll see where that goes, but it's obviously we've been out an attorney now for about 4 months, which impacts others' caseloads. In addition, it's not just myself, my counterparts across the state have had difficulty hiring assistant state's attorneys in their offices. It's hard to compete with the salaries in a private job. And so we'll just see where this leads. I'll give the board an update next time. Is that the Safety Act still has not been decided by the Illinois Supreme Court. We're waiting for that ruling. Something that we've been working on for a few years, and I don't want to steal Pam's thunder. I don't know if she's going to talk about the online dispute resolution, but it's going to be a program through the clerk's office that someone with a speeding ticket can negotiate with assistant state's attorney for resolution of that case online, pay the ticket online, everything's done online so they don't have to come to court. It will be helpful for people who not get tickets that don't live in this jurisdiction, since we have I-90 going through Boone County, and also just not having to leave work perhaps for a court date, that sort of thing. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not quite sure when the rollout's going to be, but it's going to be maybe in the next few months. And then finally, I did want to mention something that's not in the report because I just learned about it this afternoon. We do get a grant through the AG's office for the victim witness coordinator in my office that reimburses part of her salary. We had been stuck at $23,850 for many years. Last year, it went up to $25,000. And then this afternoon, I got a notification that this year we're going to get $40,000. So we got a $15,000 increase in our grant. So we're very thrilled about that. Our coordinator does a wonderful job. We've increased the reporting that we do, and we've really shown a need in her job of the great things she does for the people in this community. So we're very thankful for that. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, the Public Defender Quarterly Presentation. Ms. Cross, please.
All right, good evening. I did have a chance to look at the agenda tonight. I did see a lot of items on there, so I will try to keep it short and sweet. The March and April services rendered reports are on board docs tonight, so they do a good job of updating what's going on in our office over the last quarter. As Tricia mentioned, we are waiting on the Illinois Supreme Court to issue their opinion on bail reform. So we just remain business as usual until that opinion comes out. In the last quarter, I think one of the best things is we've had some great continuing legal education opportunities in the office. All of the attorneys in the office have taken advantage of some really great programs that have been offered for little or no cost. And that included a week-long trial advocacy program for our, that was in Chicago for our newest attorney, Attorney Tinsley. We do have an opening for a part-time scanner that has been posted probably for about a month now. We have been interviewing. I do have an offer out to somebody, so I am hoping maybe by the end of next week that position may be filled. Also, we do expect to have an intern this summer. It is an unpaid internship. He's finishing up his first year of law school at the University of Iowa, and so he'll be joining us at the end of May. So those are kind of some of the basics. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. On to the probation quarterly presentation. Ms. Galliano.
Good evening. The last several months, I've been educating the board, I hope, on who we have in our department, the adult probation, juvenile probation. Today, I gave you some information about drug court. Jenny Crotchett, our drug court officer / coordinator, just finished her renewal grant. That program is funded by Adult Redeploy Illinois grant. Functioning of that program, every 3 years she has to write a renewal, so that was just turned in this last month. In that grant, she's asking to continue our drug court program, and she's also asking for another officer to expand our services. I will give you more information about that hopefully next month when I hope we get that grant, which would expand services for high-risk, high-need clients. I don't have any other updates other than, you know, my staff has been getting a lot of training as well, often free training. Our Family Violence Coordinating Council is offering some free training for first responders, court personnel, law enforcement in June 19th. It's free of charge. It's 3.5 hours. I believe I've distributed that information to some other department heads. I will continue to do that. That's going to be offered at the community building. Other than that, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? None?
No?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next quarterly presentation from the Circuit Court, Ms. Caduto.
Good evening, everyone. My report's on board docs. One of the things that I did want to bring up is the union contract was finally ratified by the unit on April 20th, and the new contract will be expiring in November of 2025. Our new computers and desk scanners were installed that we were able to purchase with the AOIC grant. Otherwise, we've been business as usual in the office. And does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Caduto? Don't see anything. Okay, thank you. Section 8 is just the written monthly reports. On to number 9, new business. We need a motion to approve the claims with the understanding that Carl Johnson abstained from voting on all claims presented by William Charles, Northern Illinois Service Company, Core and Maine, all claims submitted by the Boone County Highway Department, and all claims submitted by any county department regarding sewage, stormwater, construction, and excavation. Motion by Mr. Mueller. Seconded by Mr. Schneider. There's no discussion. Does a voice vote on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, it has to be a roll call because this is the claims. And this is outside the scope of the committee.
Okay.
Approve the claims twice a month.
Okay. Well,
That's fine.
roll call, please.
No problem. Rodney Riley, yes. Brian Schneider,
Yes.
Dave Wiltsey,
Yes.
Ray Larson,
Aye.
Matt Mueller,
Yes.
Tom Wahlberg,
Yes.
Alyssa Patterson,
Yes.
Dana Logston, Sherry Branson,
Yes.
Carl Johnson,
Yes.
Marion Thornberry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, on to presentation for the fiscal year 2022 financial audit.
Hey everyone, my name is Josh Faber. I'm a senior manager with Whipley, and along with me I have Hope Friday, who's a senior accountant. She's the one who did a lot of the day-to-day work for the audit. So I'm just going to go over some brief highlights for everybody. Keep it short and sweet. So I know you guys have a long night, so to make it as easy as possible. Everybody should have a handout in front of you, or it's up on the board. Might be hard to read up on the screen, so I'll just kind of flip through it as I go. So first page, we do 3 audit reports for the county. The first one is the independent auditor's report. It's, the general opinion that we give. We had a clean, unmodified opinion for this year's audit. The second report we give is over government auditing standards. We did have 3 findings that we did issue for this report. The first one related just to segregation of duties, just not having enough people in offices. The second one is off the book accounts. Basically, not all of the accounts, the bank accounts are recorded through the system. So we had a finding for that. And the third one is just because there's a few bank reconciliations formed, so we had a finding for that as well. So there were 3 findings. Didn't change the opinions in any way, but we felt that they were necessary to be reported, so they're in there. The third report that we issued is over compliance and internal control over the uniform guidance, which is your federal audit piece, and we had no findings there, and a clean unmodified opinion as well. The circuit clerk audit, we do a separate audit for the circuit clerk office. That one is still in progress. We are still waiting on some guidance from the state to finish that up, but we don't foresee any findings or issues with that as well. But I want to just report that was in progress and not finalized. The rest of the audit reports are all done. So moving on, things to know, a GASB statement number 87 related to leases was implemented this year. I'm not going to go into the details for that. If you want to take a look, the restatement note 15 in the audit report will detail all that information. The county expended about $2.2 million in federal funds this year. ARPA funds was one of the 2 major programs that was tested. About $379,000 of ARPA was spent in fiscal year 22. The other major program that was tested was the contract tracing response grants. That was about $308,000. So we had 2 major programs that were tested, and we had clean, unmodified opinions, no findings or issues with those. You guys received about $5.2 million of ARPA funds during fiscal year 22. Like I just said, $379,000 of that was spent. And you guys, as of November 30th, you guys had about $9.6 million remaining to be spent on those funds. Obviously, that number is probably less now, but as of November 30th, that's what we had shown as deferred revenue in your audit report. So one thing I just like to hit on, it's probably not that important to you guys, but when you look at the audit report, you'll see there's a line that's called net pension asset. You guys pay money to IMRF. They invest those funds for the pension liabilities and things like that. So you guys, it's not a liability anymore, it's that pension asset. It increased by about $8.1 million this year due to investment returns. So now there's an overall net pension asset of about 11.6 million. So I know, 3 years ago, it used to be a liability. Now you have about a $12 million asset. Pretty significant change. And that's just due to, investment returns over the last few years. Depending on how volatile the market is, that can change. $403,000 principal paid on long-term debt during fiscal year 22. One thing I will note, the county had about $2.9 million of cash uncollateralized at German American State Bank and $239,000 of cash uncollateralized at Stillman Bank as of November 30th, 2022. The next three slides, they're pretty similar, and they kind of have the same topic, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on them. Kind of in the middle of the page, under revenues, you'll see sales tax, income taxes, and other taxes. Now, there's a pretty significant increase in those three lines. If you look at 22 to 21, that's due to an increase in, the sales tax, and well, obviously sales tax, income taxes, and then replacement tax doubled this year. That's pretty common theme that we saw across the board at all counties. We don't anticipate those revenues staying consistent. They'll probably go back to normal. So, we did talk to the state, and they did say that's not wrong. I know probably 5 years ago, they had a miscalculation where they, paid more than they were supposed to and say, hey, you guys are gonna have to pay this back. That's not the case. That's your guys' money. But, there was a pretty significant increase in those funds this year, but we don't anticipate that being, a common theme going forward. So just want to make that note. So total change in that position, kind of the bottom left there, that column 2022, there's about a $10.9 million increase in that position this year. And that's on the government wide. That's not how you guys operate on a normal basis. So I'll kind of go to the next two slides to kind of provide a little bit more information on that. So change in general fund, current year to prior year, you'll see that intergovernmental line towards the top. It was a $1.3 million increase. That's due to that increase in income tax and replacement tax that I just talked about. Otherwise, they're pretty comparable to prior year. Not a whole lot of change, which is always good to see. One thing I'll note is that net change in fund balance towards the bottom left. You guys had a $4.5 million increase in your general fund balance. So that's, obviously it's pretty significant gain. Good news there. Then moving on to change in governmental funds. So this is all of your governmental funds, current year to prior year. Same thing, same trend. That intergovernmental line increased by about 2.8 million. Pretty much across the board, all your state income, all state taxes that you guys received went up this year. So there was about an increase in all governmental funds, about $7.4 million this year. Is there any questions on kind of wasn't really a whole lot of change current year to prior year on that. Just want to make sure that you guys are aware of, that those tax revenues that increased pretty substantially, and, that we don't really anticipate that being a trend going forward. Any questions on that so far? Otherwise, the next two slides are just kind of more informational based, breaking down kind of your guys' revenue sources by function. I know it's kind of hard to read on the board, so I'll kind of just read it out to you. So your top revenue source is property taxes at 31.2%. The second one is your operating grants. That includes those state taxes that I just talked about. 21%. Charges for services is third at 18.3%. Other taxes at 10.6%, and sales tax is ultimately 8.4% of your total revenue source. Again, I'll remind you, property taxes being 31.2%. I'll explain why that's important here in a few slides, but that being, a third of your revenue is substantial, obviously, to your operations of the county. Next slide for expenses. Same situation. Public safety is the county's number one expense at 27.7%. Judiciary at 27.2% is number two. General control and admin, 23.1%. Highway at 13.2%, and then health at 7.8%. So that's the top five expenses by function, just kind of broken down, showing you guys how your expenses are allocated. So going to the next slide. So obviously I just, talked about how property taxes is a third of the revenue source of the county. And obviously that's, you take your tax rate times your assessed valuation. As this kind of just shows how your valuation's gone over the last 3 years. Obviously you can see, or 6 years, so I'm sorry, assessed valuation continues to go up. If you look at the flip side on the next slide, your real estate tax rates, so assessed valuation's going up, tax rates are going down, so you're still able to maintain those property tax revenues while still, keeping tax rates low for your constituents. So I like to show that just because obviously, as members of the board, you kind of want to see how you're doing things for your constituents. And, as valuations continue to go up, tax rates are continuing to go down, you guys are still able to, maintain your revenues that are, extremely important at a third of your guys' that's all I really have on the audit. You know, it's pretty comparable last year. Wasn't a whole lot of, you know, noteworthy topics to talk about. So any questions?
No questions, comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to 9.3. Motion to approve amending section 10, holiday of the Boone County Personnel Policy to include the Juneteenth holiday. This amendment would be effective immediately.
So moved.
Motion. What's that?
So moved.
Oh, Mr. Riley. Motion by Mr. Riley, second by Mr. Schneider. Any discussion on this? Ms. Tobin?
Sure.
Okay.
No, we just thought this was a good time to bring this forward with some of the union contracts that have already settled that included the Juneteenth. I wanted the board to have an opportunity to talk about it ahead of June 18th, I think it is. So that's why it's before you this month.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion on this? Do we need a roll call for this? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. On to 9.4, I need a motion to move renewal of Comcast franchise agreement forward to the county board for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Wiltie. Ms. Tobin, you on this?
No, the franchise agreement with Comcast expired last year, and we've been working on a renewal. Joan Sage is here tonight, and is here to answer any questions and give a little bit of detail.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman and Board. It's a pleasure to be here and appreciate all the service that you provide to the county and your residents. The franchise agreement is something that has to be done by FCC rule. What we have here is the model agreement that we have over 500 communities that have signed this agreement. It is fair and equitable to all. Basically, what it does is it's kind of like a permit to do business in the county. It allows us to come into your easements and to either bury the cable or put it up on poles. If there are poles, we usually use those, and most of them are owned by Commonwealth Edison. So we pay rent to Commonwealth Edison for those. And with us going into your easements and putting down our plant, you have the opportunity and the option to charge a franchise fee for the video part of the bills that customers receive. And you have opted to do that. Right now, it's a 5% ceiling. If the FCC changes that, you would have the opportunity to raise that. It is on customer bills, and once a quarter, we add all that money up. We don't charge you a handling fee, and we give you the money for you to use wherever you want to. Usually it goes into general funds so that you can use them as you so choose. The agreements are usually they're signed and they go into a file, and until it's the next time to renew, they're usually not looked at. What is, I think, almost more important than that agreement is that you have access to me. So if there ever is a question that you have about anything in the agreement, something that a resident brings to you, you are welcome to always give me a call, and I will address whatever those needs may be. Something I would like to point out that is, I think, very special that Comcast does provide 12 years ago to try and bridge that digital divide. Comcast created a program called Internet Essentials, and this is where income-constrained individuals can get a deep discount on the internet. We started 12 years ago with a speed of 6/1 for $9.95. We have kept the price the same, but increased the speed, which right now for $9.95, people who qualify can have a speed of 50/10. we've also added in what we call Internet Essentials Plus, and that is a speed of 100 over 20. The price for that is $29.95, but there is a federal program called the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, which people can get a $30 credit toward that bill. So it's good for internet and or cell phones. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and I will provide to you both the flyers for that, and I'll make sure that each of you has my business card as well. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Sage?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this agreement? Do we need a roll call for this? No? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. On to 9.5, discussion on text amendment 10-2023 wind and solar energy siting. Bessie?
Yes, thank you. Again, the text amendment is an amendment to Chapter 4.8 Wind and Energy Conversion Systems, as well as 4.22 Solar Energy Conversion Systems. Pursuant to the amended statute, this county board has until May 27, 2023 to make changes to our ordinances or lose the ability to do so on the siting of wind and solar. The zoning board of appeals held a public hearing on Tuesday, May 2nd, and provided the board with direction. The ZBA amended the draft, or staff has amended the draft language from ZBA recommended for approval by the zoning board of appeals with a vote of 5-0. And that language has been provided on board docs.
Okay. So we're just having discussion on this. We're not moving this.
Just discussion tonight, yep.
Hanson?
Yeah, I realized that about half of our board was able to make it to the ZBA hearing and about half of them could not. And our public does not know that. So I put together a few key highlights, and I promise I'm going to keep this brief and moving it on, because the ZBA pretty much decided everything except for like whether or not we're using LISA scores or productivity index and where to do the cuts for this. So let us begin. On your desk, you've got a notes from the PowerPoint. This is my key highlights. You want to read that carefully before the next meeting. And the letter from the Board of Health. Back when the Great Lakes Basin Railroad was trying to come into our county, I looked very deeply and heavily into protecting our aquifers and the risk to our company, or our county. And I was on the Board of Health at that time, and that is all summarized in this letter. So make sure you read that and are aware of that. If we could please bring up my first few slides, please. Okay, that's the PowerPoint. The goal was not to go through the PowerPoint, it's just these that are in the handouts.
Which slides?
It's on board docs.
There's like 20 things on board docs.
Okay.
What's it titled? What's it titled?
Yeah.
It starts with the Board of Health, and then it's followed by EPA's and federal regulations.
Is it the one?
I think it's one. It's like half, it's
S. Branson.
County Health Department, Surface Transportation.
Board of Health?
You know, it may be faster to just go through the handouts that you have on your desk rather than trying to find it on the screen. If everybody's okay with that. All right, so because of the sake of time, we're gonna, basically the first page, the notes from the thing, I really highlighted the really high key points on here, like the IEPA designated their county as being sensitive for groundwater contamination following the 1984 Groundwater Protection Act. The Groundwater Protection Act required this statewide study to be done, and from that we adopted a map which is used for later on here in my thing. But that map then looked at all of the sites throughout the state for geology and picked out the highest risk areas for contamination based upon our recharge area, the high number of contaminated sites, and other risk factors. And we ended up in one of 2 regions throughout the state. And since then, they've added a 3rd region. Now, the key point about this map is it identifies areas with a high potential for recharge. Bill Brewster with the IEPA explained in an email that these same areas would have a high potential for a liquid product or contaminate to migrate subsurface into an aquifer. So you want to stay away from your recharge area with high risk activities or businesses. Spring Township has a really high water table, and we'll get into that, get past the Board of Health. Let me move on. The next one is overview of waste hazards. And what I did is I paper clipped along the side so you can see the key points without having to flip through a billion pages. And the federal EPA, not the state, but the federal EPA declared that some solar panels are considered hazardous waste. Some are not, even with the same model and manufacture. So that is why I'm very concerned about placing these on the high-risk areas for contaminating our water floor. And not only that, but we are the main recharge area for all of northeastern Illinois, clear through to Chicago and some of the counties just west of us. The next thing in your packet is just a reminder to implement stormwater protection and erosion settlement control plans, because these are they do a lot of manipulations of the soil, which puts you at high risk and cause a lot of stormwater runoff, and there's some photos of it. Another concern was that the solar panels and wind tunnels, and I'm not picking on them, but Spring Township, there's a photo in there of the wells that are 3 feet below surface level, and their equipment can go down deep into the water table. So we want to avoid stuff like that. The next page is a map, looks like a bunch of gobbledygook. Find this one? This is the map that came out of the study from 1984. This is the Bible of the recharge areas that the county still follows. However, this reads like gobbledygook to me. It looks like some kindergarten got finger paint and did their thing. So the next map is where the county overlaid some roads on it and landmarks, so it would make sense. Okay, and the key to it is ridiculously small, so I blew that up so you could see what is real high risk and what is not high risk. And basically, anything that's moderately high to moderate is what the ZBA recommended protecting. And that's your orange, purple, pink, and red. That one on in here. Also included the greenaways map because, we got basically the greenaways areas are from putting solar and wind on, and they fall within a lot of the recharge areas. The next thing is Tom is going to talk a little bit about whether or not to use Lisa scores or productivity index and what those cut scores should be. And then I had my links, my contacts, my list of table of contents for all the studies that I did. And then I want to go back to looking at some of the maps that GIS put in with us so we know what we're dealing with. So Tom, could you talk about productivity index and Lisa scores?
Sure. Thank you, Sherry.
Mr. Wahlberg.
So at ZBA out there, I just provided some context around, and we all agree that this has been in our code for 30 years. So we're not thinking about abandoning that. Just trying to provide some context for industry that, in the farming world, agronomy world, we evaluate soil types based on the class A, B, and C soil types. So when we evaluate that, you'll see on the first slide there the range for A, B, and C class soil types. So basically what I've done there is provide context to those Lisa scores for that purpose. And you will see where we begin at 82 is the beginning of Class C soil type. So first that is if we're going to protect our farmland, which is very important. Boone County, we are an agricultural county. Best farmland. So along with Sherry's argument around the aquifers and our water is also very important. We tried to provide some context here to where we thought the best locations or land would be suited for renewable energy.
Okay.
Any questions on that? I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay, now, there's a big map that apparently did not make it onto the screen so you can see it, and we didn't copy it because I figured it'd be up on the screen. But the other two maps I did do. And basically, this map separates potential aquifer recharge areas by classification from Dr. Berg's book. And the tan areas are the low, moderate risk, and the red are the high to very high risk. Can you guys see this? Okay, let's pass this around so everybody can see that. Now, the next map is, I took it to GIS and I asked them to do an overlay, and I'm going to answer whatever questions I can, but they are here tonight in case I miss something up. And we're looking at the one that's mixed with the blue and the tan. Okay, again, your red is your high recharge areas, which is the high risk for contamination. Your tan is your lower recharge areas. And this is with a productivity index score of 69. In other words, the blue area shows the LE scores of less than 62, which is Class C soil types, is classified by the productivity index. And Class C soil types are the least productive soil types. The next map is the one with the orange and the red and the tan, your last map. And this one is the same as the previous map, although the productivity index is cut at 82%. And this map shows what was in the last map with productivity index scores of 69 or less and incorporates the least productive farmland in the productivity index. I'm redundant here. It shows your aquifer and recharge areas by classification from Dr. Berg's study. And as above, we have to decide which productivity index score to use when determining where to place solar and wind to protect our natural resources. And there's a 5,600 acre difference between the 82 and the 69 score in this county. And we also need to adopt the recommended changes from the ZBA as part of our ordinance. And what else? We have to implement geology in the land use planning so that we are not the whole county with high-risk businesses, so that we are not just singling out solar and wind. Otherwise, we can be argued in court for being arbitrary and capricious and all that. So that's something that we're going to have to do in the near future. But tonight we need to decide which cut score we're going to use, if it's the 69 or the 82, and how to mesh this with the Lisa scores. So that's why we're here to discuss.
Mr. Mueller, or all?
What I do?
Smith, did you have something quick?
I think it's 69, 82.
Oh, that was an error by
The one
GIS.
82 is 69.
That was an error by GIS.
Not you?
No. It was a simple typo is what it is. And I don't mean to throw Tammy under the bus. My apologies, Tammy. Oh, and also at the bottom of your maps, I did not mention that you have a listing of the approximate number of acres involved. So.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Mueller?
Yeah. So Sherry.
I believe it's 16.6 thousand.
Wasn't the original number 76 because that's what was in the conservation guidelines?
I don't know anything about 76 because our county, the stuff in the county, stuff that I've seen has all been 69. And Tom here brought up the cut score of 82 because it's the differentiation between the different soil types.
Mr. Wahlberg?
Yeah. Mueller, speak to that. So you're correct. The 76 number is utilized in the zoning from A1 to A2. That becomes a little bit problematic because there's no group of 76. So the next group is.
I'm sorry.
I didn't catch that.
Mr. Wiltie?
Thank you.
So the county has divided the LISA scores into 10 groups.
Okay.
So utilizing 76, which is in our code, is problematic because there's not a group that stops at 76. It goes from 69 to 82. So.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit more. It's a few more acres. But when you look at what the work, I think that Tammy and Sherry have done when they've overlaid this, it's actually far less acres than I thought it was going to be the other night. We were probably closer to 50,000 acres, and we're now down to 22,000 acres. So it seems like it sounds reasonable. The 69 score, just all those acres, was a little over 22,000 itself.
If I could just add in a couple of little stats here that Tammy pulled up for me. As for cropland that actually yields something that's farmland, we have 130,640 acres.
Interrupt for just a second. If it wasn't put into evidence at ZBA, then it cannot be used for consideration by this board for the text amendment. It has to be only evidence if it was heard at the public meeting. I'm not sure what those stats are, but
how many acres or whatever we had is what I was trying to, if I can't do it, I'll drop it.
Okay. It would probably be better, if it was not entered into evidence, then we should not use that as consideration.
All right, moving on.
Basically, excuse me.
Mr. Thornberry?
Basically, what you're doing is using numbers coming from two different areas. Mr. Mueller is talking about actual productivity based on your land. She's talking about guesswork, basically. It's what some organization came in, checked your land, and says this is what your land is classified as. It has nothing to do with productivity per se. What you've got over there that we dug up during the Agricultural Conservation and Land Easement Program is based on actual production coming off of that land.
Jesse?
Yes, so thank you. Just to reiterate then, at the ZBA, there was a lot of testimony and a lot of information given, as you could see on board docs, all the information that was provided. But the ZBA did break that down into approximately six or seven categories for each text. And the state attorney's office has provided a reference guide of the ZBA changes that are posted on your desk. Basically, there's text that was included in soil testing, additional expense mitigation for GPS and section 4.8.6, soil testing report also, as well as the Fire Protection District had requested some additional information and requirements for training and possible equipment. And then it goes on to describe some methodology, to properly dispose of solar panels, but that's in the wind one. That I apologize. And then in the wind also, there's where we came to section 4.8.13, where they speak about the LE score and the 82 number that the ZBA had landed on, kind of what you're referencing now. This is what was incorporated at the ZBA meeting by the members. And also they had some information with regards to identifying and utilizing SARA maps in the aquifer recharge. And then as well as some additional information from the state's attorney's office. So that's on the wind. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, Ms. Smith?
Sure. I don't know if you want to do it kind of category by category. We can certainly start with the two topics that Ms. Branson brought up, just so that we're sure that you want to adopt what the ZBA recommended. Do you want to start with those?
Well, Mr. Johnson?
I could ask the state's attorney a question. I know that we talked about this a little bit, and having been at the meeting the other night, Tuesday night, I guess it was. How confident are you in being able to support the 82 score as a definitive location?
So just to kind of peel that back a little bit, if everyone can remember our discussion that the state implemented the state statute that gave specific guidelines to the county when it comes to wind and solar. And there's some things that we cannot change. There might be some leeway on some things that were not discussed in the statute. And one of the things that we talked about when we first brought this to your attention was that the more reasonable the additions are, the more likely they are to be defendable and perhaps held up in court. It is a very gray area because there's been no litigation on this statute. So I think it's up to the board as to what their, appetite is for potential litigation. The more that you add and the more unreasonable it is, the more that acres that are taken out of potential locations for solar and wind, the more likely that there probably would be litigation from a solar or wind farm applicant who is denied. So that kind of leads to, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I just.
One of the things that you'll see on page 2 of the summary that we gave you was that the ZBA did make 2 recommendations regarding, that Jesse just went through that these be placed on sites that have a LISA score of 82 or below, and also to be placed on those that land in the county that has high, moderate to moderate or below that for the aquifer. So they adopted those as bright line rules for if a project should be approved or not. Based on our kind of research in this area and the potential for litigation, we moved those instead of bright line tests into the factor section of the statute. So it's one factor among many that you would use to evaluate these projects. So if you do have a project that maybe has an 84 score, but it meets the other criteria, the board can still approve it. So there's a little leeway there. It's just one of the many factors. We think legally that's going to help defend those that you put in. So they are in section on page 22 of, we'll start with the wind ordinance. If you go to page 22 of the ordinance, you'll see in red, they're in section H and I. And just to read, so it's one of the hearing factors where it says the board may approve a commercial wind energy facility special use permit application if it finds the evidence complies with state, federal, and local law and regulations and with the standards of the zoning code, including the factors listed below. The factors below are applied as a balancing test, not individual requirements to be met. And then we've added that to that section. Is that your explanation, or is that kind of muddy? And that goes to Mr. Johnson's question as to, I think, answering, we feel more comfortable in being here to defend it in litigation than a bright line rule in another location in the ordinance.
Mr. Johnson?
Okay, I think that. Yeah, I've got some questions on a couple other things, so I guess we want to tackle this part first. So I guess I'll just state that I'm okay with the 82. I mean, I'm not against lower either, but we do have to be reasonable in order to have it supported and have a legitimate argument that we're not trying to just keep everything out. So I'd be fine with the 82.
Ms. Branson?
I got 2 points here. The first one is if you look at the 2 maps that are comparing the 82 to the 69, there's really not a whole lot of difference between them. in the amount of farmland that's used there. It's very close. I also want to talk on your second page of your stuff that came from our attorneys here. Where it says to use the most up-to-date Sierra map. And Tricia, I was the. I was on the committee with the WPPA that created our up-to-date Sierra map. And that we took the guidelines that we got from this study from Dr. Berg's first book. And we were trying to make sense of it, make it a little more user-friendly. And we kind of adjusted the numbers to what we as a local community thought would be reasonable to come up with what was finally put in for our Sierra map. But it is not anywhere near the standard of a map and is not as strong of a map as the map that is from Dr. Berg's study that is written by the scientist, which is what our county currently follows. That's from this book. And I would urge you to change that from the map that we created with the WPPA committee to go back to the one that is from the scientists that the county already uses. It's a much stronger argument in court.
Just to note, the reason why that I actually placed the text in there as it relates to the updated Sierra map, and that was referencing in the event that it became more up to date down the line and down the future, so that it would cover new maps referencing that. But I understand what you're saying. You're wanting a completely different reference.
What I'm saying is that if you pull our current comprehensive plan, there's a copy of the draft of the Sierra map that was done by the committee that's not scientists, which would be the most up to date. And that is not nearly as good or as strong of a map from a scientific standpoint as the one that was created by the geologist that heads the Department of Natural Resources. That's a much better map to be adhering to.
That would be, if that's something you'd want, then they'd have to decide whether or not that map is the most relevant for what you're looking for.
Right, and we just have to make sure that we pointed to a reference so that, applicants who come in, we have to have them have a map that they can look at and figure out where these properties are, so.
And I would reference them to the map that is used by the Department of Soil and Conservation or Soil and Water or whatever they are over there on Appleton Road. That's Dr. Berg's map. It's just a much better map. Any comments, opinions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to follow this. So going back to the state's attorney's comment that if it wasn't in the evidence for the ZBA, is that soil map that you're talking about that's more from the scientist, was that referenced at this?
That was the first thing I entered.
You referenced that.
I entered that in my evidence, my thumb drive. It's in the record.
Okay.
And the maps that I refer back to goes to that map.
But our planning documents or plan code was said
comprehensive
reference the Sierra map.
When Great Lakes Basin Railroad was trying to come into our county, I got really interested in how to protect our resources. And so I did all this research. And at that time, I took it to our Health and Human Services Committee, because we were a different form of government back then. Took it to that committee, and they reactivated the WPPA, which is the Water Protection Preservation something. And anyway, as part of that organization, we were looking at how to look at geology for land use planning. And that group, which is just, local people here, created the Sierra map that is in the comprehensive plan. It is a different map. So what you need, I would really strongly encourage you not to lean on the one that's done by the non-scientist and to lean on the one that is done by the scientist, geologist, and the person who is the head of the Department of Natural Resources. Because in the law, it requires us to go back to the Department of Natural Resources for any concerns. So we don't want to be mixing apples and oranges.
But it's the Sierra map that's in the comprehensive plan.
The Sarah map is just a user-friendlier,
I'm just saying-
much more user-friendly map.
Referenced in the comprehensive plan, the Sarah map.
Okay.
This,
Smith?
The comprehensive plan, the Sarah map is in the comprehensive plan. And then as for your question, I believe what you were asking is if both maps are in evidence from the other night and they both were placed into evidence, so both could be considered by the board.
Okay, excellent. But your recommendation, Sherry, is that the
Dr. Berg's.
Dr. Bird's one.
Dr. Berg's map.
We adopt because it's got scientific backing and you.
It's a much stronger map. It's already in effect and being used by soil and water. And it has been since the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, and then if I may, Mr. Chairman, and so do I understand that the previous discussion about 10 minutes ago, that's on page 22 of the ordinance, and that adds to 4.8 as a hearing factor, and is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to recommend, just as long as I have the floor, we might want to consider a special meeting toward the end of this month on these issues to make sure we got it right. But I'm really glad of all the time that's being put into this. And I just want to make sure we get it right. So it's just something to throw out there for the consideration of members.
I know it's unusual for a board member to come in and put in this much at this level.
That's okay.
But I tried to really give you the Cliff Note version
I'm fine with that.
because it's a mountain of research.
We're not really on a special meeting, but we're hoping to get tonight some comments, and if there's things that have to come back, I think our intent is to put it on next Thursday as well, before the board meeting. And if you're still not comfortable, that's fine, but just so you know, we had intended to bring it next week as well.
Well, then if you want my 2 cents, going with Dr. Bird's map, the soil map, or referencing them both, but it seems if they're not contradictory, then let's go with Dr. Bird's map.
I think we're, in talking with Jesse, that we would get maybe some background on each map and provide that for next Thursday so that you can make a determination based on that.
I'd like to know.
And where would,
You get to do more research on the Sarah
where would
map.
that go in the ordinance?
I was on the committee that created the Sarah map. I mean, I'm a great resource.
The question is, where would that, whichever map or both, where would that go?
You can go to page 22, section 4.8.13I. And that's the wind ordinance.
Mr. Thornberry?
Oh, there, I see it, yeah.
In red.
Yes, I see it. Thank you.
Mr. Thornberry?
I think what Sherry's trying to say, and I agree with her 100%. If this has to go to court and somebody says, can you prove it? The Sierra map has no grounds of proof because it's just something people dreamed up. Where the scientific study, anything you can prove is going to come from Mr. Bird's report.
Well said.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
If I may, I think that the important piece to this is also creating language that will stand the test of time, meaning if there's another map that comes along that's even more dated and more accurate going forward, that this also captures that as well. So we have to think of all the possibilities and what kind of language we can to capture that.
My fear is that if you have somebody that's fighting this in court and they're going to the little Sarah map that is in the comp plan, they're going to say, well, we made some mistakes or something that's a little off. And it is just not a good, strong, solid thing. I think down the line, if you need to adopt a new map, then you can incorporate it in the ordinance at that time. But if we know there's a high risk of being sued, we want to do everything we can to lessen the risk.
And I don't think we're disagreeing with you about which map should be used. I think we're just saying, like, let's get the name of the map, you know, when it was created, you know, just so that if, like what Justin's saying, if that's updated through the National Geographical, you know, and see, that's one, you know, that's what I mean. So that's why I think we're just gonna.
I can help you
gather
with
some
that.
more information on that, so the board members all know the difference between the two.
Yep, I can help you with that.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I didn't know if there was any more question about the map issue.
Any other questions at this time on the map? Mr. Wiltsey?
No, not on the maps, no.
Oh, okay. Nothing else on the map? Mr. Wiltse, you have something else?
Yeah, it's to me that the wind, so I'm going to tell you what I was told. So they used to be able to do 1.5, I don't know, megahertz or the wind farm structures have gotten bigger. And if we try to stick at the 1.5 or whatever that it was originally being talked about when this ordinance was last included, we are dealing with a shorter structure that will go not as far down into the ground. And if it doesn't go as far down into the ground, then it's not going to, it's less likely to mess up the aquifer. But the other thing that is, I also learned was that we've got a lot of tile in the farms, and we want to make sure that the tiles don't get disrupted and change all of the drainage patterns, because I was told that 40 years ago, there were a lot of areas in Boone that were too swampy, and the farmers put in a lot of tile to make it change that drainage pattern to make that soil more useful.
Yeah, that's in your packet.
Mr. Thornberry?
He's talking about tillage for the wind farms. That was already addressed in the original ordinance passed here. And that's not one the government's going to challenge, I don't believe, because that's basically between the farmer and the person installing the wind farms. I mean, there's already stuff in the wind farm ordinance protecting the tillage.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Oh.
I was just going to ask, just to finish up this area, was the thought 82 or 69? ZBA adopted 82. And so I think we're just looking for some direction from the board to what number they would.
Mr. Riley?
I'm comfortable staying with the 82 that the ZBA recommended. I think that we've discussed that. Any other thoughts?
Mr. Wiltse?
I agree. If we're looking to be careful and make sure there's a finding and the ZBA says 82, I think that's what we should stick with.
Ms. Branson?
I was just kind of looking for some guidance from our state's attorney from a legal standpoint, if one was easier to defend than the other.
I would say probably 82 is because it expands the available, especially when you're then considering another layer of the aquifer. You know, some are going to cancel out each other. So I would say we're better off with 82 from a legal standpoint, principal point.
Okay. And I'm good with it.
So do we have a consensus for 82? Sounds like. Okay.
And I think the only thing we got to figure out is the Sarah maps, and then we'll have that by next week, right?
We burnt the Sierra.
Well, no, state's attorney's still discussing them, so we'll get it figured out.
Mr. Johnson, you were first.
Thank you, sir. If I could, I guess, I don't know if this is for the state's attorney or for this board or whatever. In the past, when we've gone through windmills and dealt with wind ordinances and concerns that people had, and even with solar to some extent on some of this stuff, one of the big things that just, and please, I apologize if it's addressed in the state ordinance completely, but I didn't see anything in these notes that talked about flicker for neighboring.
It is specifically addressed. It is in the ordinance, and we took the language exactly from the state statute, so there's really not a lot of leeway there. I believe it's 30 hours of flicker.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. You're right. Yep, that's right. And what's the recourse if it's more than 30 hours of flicker?
So there has to be, there's a complaint process, and basically they do a study over time to see if that's more than 30 hours, and then they have to remediate that.
Good luck, right?
So in other words, there is none.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, hopefully, I mean, it's special use, and if they're in violation, then, I mean, there are avenues that we can take to hold them in compliance.
Ms. Patterson?
I don't know, and I don't know who to ask. if we're dealing with wind in particular, one of the things that was brought to my attention is if they're 40 feet deep slabs, while they're out there marking everything with GPS and whatnot, marking the slab specifically. So in the future, if they're decommissioned and somebody's putting in drain tile or making changes, they know exactly where those cement slabs are because they're only taking out 5 feet of it.
Yeah.
Permitting process.
Correct.
Is that in there?
It is.
It's not necessarily written in there specifically to that, but it's part of the permitting process, but they'd have to identify those as part of a site plan.
Okay, perfect.
Scale drawing, and that would be.
So we would have a record of it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Thornberry?
On your deal, the farmer gets a land, he gets a map too, so he knows where everything is and he doesn't follow it up. So everybody's got a map of what's supposed to be out.
But farms sell, like it's, they transfer. So if there's not some kind of a record that is going with the land is what I'm concerned about.
There will be. Also, this flicker effect. A lot of things are being modernized now. They're coming out with wind turbines that don't even have turbines or wind blades. There's some located on Route 57 right now. All it is a straight pole up in the air with jet streams in them. The wind blows through them. Doesn't spin. It's just a jet stream blowing through the turbine. That's some of the new ones that are coming out. There's some of them located on Route 57 going south. Also, when we were looking at this before, back in 2012 and 2014, it depends on who you're talking to about flicker effect. Because I never found anybody that had 30 hours of flicker effect anywhere, except for the people that didn't want them. They come up with all kinds of stuff. We interviewed me, Bob Wahlberg, Ron Waite, and Craig. That was on the board back at that. Schultz. We were at a meeting in Dixon. When that meeting was over, we stopped in Paw Paw and interviewed people that owned headland or wind turbines on their property. And the basic consensus of everybody we talked to was flicker effect was the least of their problems. Most of them said they had it like 15 to 20 minutes in the morning and 15 to 20 minutes. And 90% of the time you didn't even notice it because you were doing something else. And the worst thing that the people that we talked to hated about wind farms was the garbage they left laying on their property that they had to go out and clean up. From the people that had the wind farms, there was very few complaints. Some of them said they wouldn't have them again if they had a choice, but it wasn't because of what was wrong with them. It was because of what the people who put them in left there. One guy said his biggest complaint was that the map that they gave him showing everything that was supposed to be where it was supposed to be was wrong. They ran into some transfer lines that weren't supposed to be where they were at and things of this nature. There was very few complaints about the concrete slabs. The complaints that everybody brought to the board back then, in my opinion, and the opinion of the people that interviewed these people, most of the complaints that we were hearing were non-substantiated by the people who actually had wind farms.
Yeah, I'm going to actually off of something Marion just talked about, but going back to our conversation of about 10 minutes ago, where it was said that the location of the tower of the slabs that go down, the pylons or whatever, and the whole thing that it was about, it's in the permitting process. Well, 20 or 30 years from now, when these things are decommissioned, I'd rather have that kind of language also in the ordinance requiring that kind of record to be kept. Because can you imagine what kind of a chaos the staff's going to have 20 years from now, trying to figure out where the permit file is to do this? So I'm thinking that if we put it in the ordinance as a requirement that it's shown, and Marion was just talking about how the maps were wrong. I mean, that's what I'm trying to think about avoiding, and would urge us as we draft this ordinance to just put that into some place in the ordinance as well, and not just as part of the permit applications.
And I agree.
Ms. Branson?
Just a side note, I believe that I know that Julie Newhouse showed a slide of a little robotic machine that would map out where all the concrete was and tiles before and after the stuff was built. And I believe that's adopted and included in the ZBA's recommendations. So there should be a record there for that. And my other question is for our state's attorneys down there. Is there any way we can carve out Spring Township on our map and not put solar and wind in there because of the high water table?
If I could address maybe two questions and then we'll get to that. One, just briefly,
Sure.
The site plan is part of the application, which would outline all those locations. So that it has to be included in the application, which would be kept in the building. So it is part of the ordinance.
Mr. Wilson?
Plenty of experience I've had with the as-built being different from the site plan proposed building. And that's what I'm looking at. What's the as-built and where will it actually end up?
Understood. I don't want to speak too much to the final permitting process because I'm not responsible for that, but the site plan should coordinate, but if it doesn't, the final inspection should indicate that. Or we could make sure that happens, that's how it's supposed to happen, so that it's under record that it has been not exactly the way it was originally on the site plan, but that in the final plans that it would be.
And I'm just wanting to make sure that we've got a way to find that easily without being, going through 20 pages, 20 years worth of
I'll make a
documents, however they're stored.
Edit.
Okay, thanks.
And then as for the information about the tile, so one of the notes it's both the same on the wind and solar handout I gave you. One of the ZBA recommendations that was not incorporated in the ordinance based on review of it. So when we were talking to the ZBA on Tuesday night, they had made the recommendation, but we had let them know that we weren't sure exactly the agricultural impact mitigation agreement, as it was about 10:45 at night, when we were still doing this. So we advised the board that we looked at our legal opinion regarding it. So basically, the AIMA really gives a lot of detail in regards to the drain tile and what can be done and what can't be done. And so we believe based on what's in there in the statute that it's one of those areas that I don't think we can restrict further, which would be requiring a specific robot to do the drain tile determination or mapping, because there's several other methods that you can do that. And there's a conclusion in the AIMA that that's what the result you have to end with. So I don't think we can tell them how to do that. I think that would be more restrictive than what the statute allows. So if you look on the second page of both the wind and solar, we ended up putting that legal opinion on there. And then as for Spring Township, I think it would be very difficult to exclude based on like a township border. I think that you're addressing the concern of the water table in the maps, because it's, things don't stop at the border. If the same
I gotcha.
Are in other areas, how do we distinguish those?
I gotcha. Thank you for clarifying.
Ms. Patterson? Yes.
I'm good.
Mr. Thornberg?
Her idea that how defendable do we think that is, though?
I'm sorry, the water table?
Yeah.
I think that goes along the lines of the LISA score.
Okay.
I think that maybe it's a little bit more problematic than the LISA score, because I think the LISA score, it's something that we've used in many locations in our code regarding the projects. And then the aquifer is also like subsurface versus soil at the surface. But it's the board's decision to make. And if that's something that you want to put forth, that is, we'll put it. And I think it also helps that we're putting it as a factor instead of a bright line. But I think, honestly, anything that we do outside the scope of the statute opens us up to litigation. It's just how much risks that the board is willing to take.
Lisa, score, then what's everybody's take on that? Just to weigh in on.
I think, excuse me.
Mr. Thornburg.
I think the aquifer maps that she has here should have some effect on it because we've already been declared a sensitive area for contamination. I mean, that should be one of the things that we take into effect if we decide to put something in there that says we don't think we should have wind farms in these areas because we're sensitive and these are sensitive areas. That should give us some kind of control about where they go.
And those areas were determined by the Department of Natural Resources,
Not by us.
who wrote this book. And the head of that is the guy whose department is mentioned in the law as to who's supposed to decide what's risky and what's not. There's a clause in that big fat listing of legalese that says that if you have concerns or whatever, it's got to go through the Department of Natural Resources. But the head of that department is the guy who wrote this book.
Any other conversation? Ms. Smith, go
I
ahead.
don't know if anyone else has any comments, but if not, I'd like to maybe just start at, and just get your take on the other, the consensus on the other ZBA recommendations. I don't think they were nearly as controversial as the two that we just spoke of. The first one, and this is both for solar and wind, talks about the soil test. Baseline level of contaminants prior to construction, and then doing testing every 6 months, basically to monitor those contaminants to make sure that there's not a change in the soil. So we drafted some language to that regard. It's on page, look at the one in the wind, it's page 9, section 4.8.6J. We didn't have, as from a legal standpoint, we didn't think that this was overly burdensome or going to cause much potential litigation. I didn't know if anyone had an opinion on that.
Mr. Wiltie?
I'm just wondering whether once a year would be more reasonable rather than once every 6 months.
It's certainly up to the board. There was evidence about the soil testing placed into the ZBA at the hearing. But you can certainly determine if you think it's more reasonable at
Mr. Thornberry?
I think we should leave it the same because at least for the beginning, once you determine that there's no leakage coming off of them there that's going to affect anything, then you can drop it back to once a year or twice a year. Or once a year or once every 2 years. But in order to get an idea of what's happening the first six to 12 months, to make sure that there's not any leakage coming off of there that's going to hurt anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I follow that.
Mr. Riley?
Can we amend it to, like, if for the first 3 years, let's say? That sound about right? Or is that too long?
I think part of the problem could be, as it ages, it could start degrading faster, though, too. So I'm not sure if.
And I wasn't there at the ZBA hearing, and if we feel comfortable that there's enough evidence about 6 months and why, then I'll shut up. Let's stay.
I'm just saying for the first 3 years, every 6 months, and then after that, we can go yearly or something. That would be my take on it. Anybody else?
Ms. Branson?
I think the reason the ZBA went with the frequent testing was because of our high risk from our geology.
Okay.
They just want to make sure that there's not a problem, and apparently this type of testing is not terribly expensive.
Soil testing is
It's easy, and it's just covering our butts more than anything.
Mr. Johnson?
I'm just going to play devil's advocate because I know this has come up with solar panels, and I'm sure the wind and the solar people are going to say the same thing. We put this out, this is real general to take soil tests. What are we testing for? Right? It's great to take a soil test and we get a baseline, and I understand that baseline, we see what contaminants are there. But what are we proposing that either the solar panels or windmills are going to do to contaminate the ground. In this, we say, let's take this soil test. Okay, so what if it comes back different? How do we prove, what are we looking for? How are we going to translate that into some cause and effect to affect the possibility of this?
Good point.
I mean, I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just pointing the holes that we have to seriously consider. I think we did the soil testing on the Duke Energy solar project, and I think in that project, or in that language, I think we had something to the effect of, we did the baseline testing to establish baseline as to what the contaminants were in the existing soil. And then we had specific things that we were testing for and contaminants that were, products that were being used for the creation of that solar panel. I don't remember what they were, but I think we need to try and figure out something that we're testing for so that we have a legitimate basis for doing soil testing. Otherwise, their argument is going to be, how do we know the farmer's not spraying additional chemicals or some other kind of chemical or a different kind of pesticide? And that came up in the Duke Energy. That's how we ended up coming up with certain things we were testing for. I'm all for it. We just have, if we're going to put it in, we have to make sure it's solid so that it can't just go before a judge and judge say, well, that couldn't be more vague. And that's just a way to keep them from coming.
Mr. Thornberry?
Soil testing is done for a reason. And most of your soil testing is done to determine what your soil needs or doesn't need to produce whatever it is you're producing, corn, soybeans, whatever. So when you do a soybean or when you do a field or a soil test, you know what you're testing for before you ever test. You're going out there to see if your soil is going to do. So when you go out there to put a solar farm on land that's been growing corn, you take soil samples. You're going to compare that soil sample to the last soil sample that was brought off of that land, regardless of what was grown there. After you've had that on there if you had a solar farm on there for 6 months, do another soil test. And if that soil test has changed anywhere, any shape, any form, it's not very hard for someone who does, some laboratory that does these soil tests to determine what changed and what caused it. They're called scientists for a reason.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, I think we've all had an experience where we go for a blood test. And then when we ask about X, Y, and Z, and they go, oh, that wasn't in that panel. I think I understand what Carl's talking about. We want to give some direction of whatever contaminants, lead or whatever. It might have to be some very, I don't want to use the word vague, but something that's open enough that it can talk about minerals or other contaminants or elements that weren't in the original baseline test that are now evident. But even that, if they're not testing for whatever those things are, it won't be there. So I think it's a valid point.
Johnson?
I guess I'd be interested, because I don't have it in front of me, as to what we put in. I think it was the Duke Energy, and compare that. Perhaps we can have that information for next week and take a look at that. In reality, for the wind turbines, I think you're looking at things that are in the composition of the motor assembly, greases, what kinds of oils and maintenance type stuff do they do, so that if there's spillage, if a motor starts to break down, is that leaching other things down into it? In reality, the wind turbine is a combination of fiberglass, plastic, metal, rubber, those things, but it's the other parts internally. Is there lead in the motors or turbines of those? Could be. So that could break down, powderize, be down into the ground, things like that. I think we need some information on what makes that turbine tick, I guess.
Or at least try to for next week.
Ms. Branson?
Just on a side note, we're gonna run into the same issue with the solar, and I believe that the US EPA article goes into some of the hazardous materials that are listed that we want to test for on the solar panels. Or the sites of the solar panels. And also, before I forget this, because I'll get easily distracted, I want to apologize to Tammy in our GRS department, because when she was printing these maps up, she did catch that there was a typo on the blue map, the one with the blue in it. And she had me change it on mine, and then we printed some up, and then I did not catch it. So I'm looking at Carl's, and some of them went out that said, with the one with the blue in it says it's 82, and that's actually supposed to be less than 69. So if you could correct that real quick, that'd be great. It'll make more sense that way.
That would be everybody.
And it shouldn't be everybody, because she went back and she changed it. And I also want to thank her, because her office worked her asses off to get these maps ready for us in 24 hours. And I'm looking at her over there. She looks very, very tired. And if we have any questions for her, let's ask them. And if we don't, let the poor woman go home, because she worked 8 hours before she came in.
That would be.
Does anybody any questions for Tammy?
They're back.
Tammy, you get to escape. Thank you very, very much. You're awesome.
Okay, Ms. Smith?
I was just gonna say, so if we try to bring the best information for contaminants next time, otherwise it seems like there's maybe a consensus to keep that provision in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one is, again, at the wind, it's, some of the farmers are concerned that maybe for the wind, it would disturb their GPS, their tractors. So we just added language that mirrored some other language within that statute, just making it clear that it was also GPS and that it impacted the property or surrounding properties that would have to be remediated. It's on the document titled Reference Guide for ZBA Changes to Wind Ordinance. The actual ordinance, it's section 11. The document. Oh, I know.
Thank you.
So that was just a suggestion from, I can't remember if it was the Farmland Protection Project, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Wiltsey.
I had the misfortune of reading a 1993 contract in the early days of cable television, and they just didn't anticipate all the stuff that was going to happen. And I'm thinking, as I look at this language where it says, for example, television signals, we might want to add some language that says something like, or other broadcast forms of communication, or something else that gives some way that if technology that it can be kind of covered. And it's a thought, and I don't know quite how you say it, but you certainly could say television or other broadcast signals. At least that would be a little bit of a broader description.
We can look at that. And also it is kind of, the language is kind of picked out of a whole section. So I'll see if the other section has anything related to that expansion. I don't know if there's anything else in that.
I think when I was reading something in there, it said that we couldn't make any conditions on any interference coming off of the windmills. I'm not sure, maybe I'll look again, but I think it said something that we couldn't do that. Mr. Thornberry?
You're probably right on that, because that was one of the things that everybody was bitching and moaning about. We went through this and set up our ordinance the first time. They were saying their cows quit giving milk because of all the electrical current that's running through the ground. I mean, this was something, and the state said back then that was a non-provable factor. You cannot prove that your cows are going to quit giving milk because of an electrical current. I mean, that was one of the things, that's probably why they put that ordinance in there, that statement in there in the state, because it was an unprovable fact. Because nobody could prove that there was an actual current running across the ground every time a wind farm went up.
just briefly looking at the statute, it looks like they're talking about, there's not sound limitation for the wind tower. I don't know if that was what you were thinking.
No, there was an argument on that too.
Or. We can take a double look at it. I do know that this came from a lot of the sample ordinances as well, so it's in quite a few of those. But we'll take a look.
Yeah, I know some other people that have lived by the windmills and it affected their TV signal, so. And there's nothing they could do about it. And that was 20 years ago. Mr. Lawson?
There is such a thing called electromagnetic frequency radiation. That's a thing. If that's coming off the windmill, then I'm not entirely too sure how you would go about blocking it, short of isolating it in some kind of, I don't know, some big lead sock or something. You can test for EMF radiation too. I mean, if you have a meter, like if you stood in front of your microwave and you had one of these boxes, it would tell you exactly how much EMF is coming off of your, it could be like as much as like 200 amps, as opposed to like sitting in front of your computer, which is like just a little bit, but it's a real thing. And I'm sure there's some interference that could be caused.
Mr. Thornberry?
It's like he said, you're gonna have anything and everything, and that was one of the state's arguments, is you can't eliminate everything all the time. And they compared it to microwaves and computers. You get, what do they call, ultraviolet rays off of your computers. You get it off of your microwaves. You get it off of just anything that's run by electricity has a screen. You're gonna get ultraviolet rays and all kinds of stuff. And there's no defense for it. That's why the state said you can't regulate it.
Mr. You have something?
No, I was just referencing that the ultraviolet lights. So, no, I think that's good.
Just continue to look into it, guys. That's all we can do at this point. I think we could talk about theory all night long as far as that goes, but let's get some facts on it and move on.
Yeah, if we could do something about if there is interference somehow, if we could have that for time, I'd be for that. The consensus would be to have that, right? Okay. Yeah, so I think the consensus is if we could do something about what you're talking about for the wind, section 4.8.6K4.
And then look at it, expand it to kind of cover new technology. The next one is just adding the soil test that we just talked about, the list of what's required in the annual report, since we added the soil test. So thought that would be good to add there. The next one, now keep in mind, this is just like what we added. There's a whole paragraph before this, but it's on page 14, if you want to look at your ordinance, section 4.8.7 B2. And basically the fire departments wanted an actual written plan with a kind of a timeline as to when the training is going to happen, because there's a couple solar companies or solar fields that are already in existence and they have not done any training with them. And they thought it was important to give it in writing, that training. So we just added that to both the wind and solar.
Looks good to me.
Sounds reasonable. And then for the rest of the wind document, we did talk about everything except for at the very end, page 22, section 4.8.12. We talked about having a hearing officer run the ZBA at the applicant's expense of the county, but having that at the recommendation of basically Jesse's position, so that there's some triggering event as to when that hearing officer would run. they wouldn't make the decisions. They're purely just, being the one taking evidence and, calling the witnesses, swearing them in, that sort of thing. So I didn't think that was and that was a staff recommendation. So if there's nothing else on that, we move to solar, and this should maybe go a little quicker because some of the solar are the same. Going down to number 2, this is on the document I handed out, the sheet. It's on page 11, section 4.22.7. And these are some other, I think the Boone County Conservation District or the Farmland Protection wanted to add some language of proof of inspection of all solar panels. This is on the annual report. The soil testing again that we just talked about, and also compliance with the vegetation plan. So the list here is just adding things to the annual report that the company would have to file every year. And this was also adopted by the ZBA. That's anything controversial there. Again, then the next one is just the language about the training. The ZBA also adopted here, page 13, we added a section 4.22.9A6 that basically we have to describe the methodology to properly dispose of all the solar panels and any other materials removed from the site. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson.
On that exact point, I'm noticing as we transition from the wind to the solar, that same language is on this wind one as well. And it says solar panels. I don't know if that's.
Right, no, it was a typo.
Okay.
Crossed off the wind.
All right, thank you.
This is what happens when you're doing it at about 4 o'clock. So yeah, that one, again, was just saying that they have to define how they're going to dispose of them.
Okay.
And I think, and then the rest of them were the same that we just talked about with wind. So those were all the recommendations from the ZBA. So, and then, so we'll bring back what you guys talked about or had questions about. And then I don't know if there were other questions on the ordinance in general or concerns you had. And if you don't have them tonight, I guess I would suggest that if you want some language changed or something added, or you think you want to add something, if you could call our office before next Thursday and talk to us about it so that we can have it ready for the board for next Thursday. Hopefully facilitate a good discussion.
Mr. Mueller?
So Tricia, there was one thing I brought up to ZBA about the reverse setbacks. Is that something we cannot put into the regulations?
You say the setbacks?
Reverse setbacks. So like if we have all the landowners adjacent to the solar projects sign off on that?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
Setbacks are pretty much set as it talks about participating or non-participating, whether they can sign or not.
Okay. Any other discussion on the solar? Mr. Riley?
Before we move on to the next item, I'd like to take a 5-minute break if we could.
Good with me.
Right, madam?
Take a 5-minute.
I'm supposed to second.
to 9.6. I need a motion to move ordinance 23-13 TA-04-2023 Boone County text amendment for the county board as presented.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Riley,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Branson. Ms. Roberts, do you want to discuss this or?
I can.
Ms. Mavel?
So, this text amendment is coming back to the board in March. The board addressed this particular text amendment and made some amendments to it, but ultimately the text amendment as amended was not passed by the board. So in April, a motion was made to reconsider the text amendment. That motion passed. Pursuant to our code, then the text amendment goes back on the docket for the May meeting. So right now, we're kind of back where we were at March admin. You've got on board docs, you've got the animal show rodeo text amendment as was passed on to you by the ZBA. I did a memo sort of giving you a few options depending on what the appetite for the board is. There were some changes that I made to the ordinance that seemed pretty non-controversial, and I sort of determined whether or not those items were non-controversial by whether or not they came up in discussion or were voted on as amendments, and I've listed those items in numbers 1 through 6 in my memo. So if those are items that the board would like to adopt as changes to the existing ordinance, I've given you some language that you can do to do that. And then I listed out items 7 through 10 are the actual amendments that were made by the board when they were discussing what came to the board from the ZBA. I listed those. I also described who voted how on each of those amendments, just so you knew, was this one close or was this one not close? And then on the last page, I've given you a few different options, and you certainly don't have to use any of those options, but I thought they were probably the most likely courses of action the board might want to take. And I describe, if the board wants to do X, here's what that would mean, and here's the language you would want to use for that particular motion. So if there's an option I missed here, I'm happy to help you out crafting some motion language, but that's kind of what my memo is intended to do here.
Thank you for doing this. Yeah, I think, for everyone's interest in time here, I think that if you're looking to maybe draft a motion, or if we craft one to adopt the 1 through 6 and perhaps number 10, that seems to be, something that's favorable with adding the veterinarian. And then my intention is that we review the others under an ad hoc committee. So I'd like to do that.
And that would be option C, and there's 2 suggested language motions under that option, because they'll depend on whether or not the person making that motion wants to have the animal safety plan approved by a veterinarian or just reviewed by a veterinarian. So I've got both options under C.
Yes, thank you. Reviewed, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah. Or initially. Thank you.
Was that a motion? Were you making a motion?
Yes, I would like to make that motion. Sorry.
A second.
A motion was made to amend by Mr. Wahlberg, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion on this? Mr. Wiltsey?
Just for clarification, then, so the amendment was to accept 1 through 6 and then send the rest of it to a committee? Is that what?
10.
Yes.
And 10?
Addition of the veterinarian. In language in C.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Robert, would that language be that the animal safety plan should be reviewed by a veterinarian or approved by?
Review, yes, reviewed was what we thought that was to be consistent with some other ordinance. We like the word review.
Okay, Mr. Riley?
Does that, I'm trying to find it again here, Tom. Does that include we had talked about a distance or making sure somebody was on call? I know the review part, but was that included in, refresh my mind?
I don't think so.
It actually, you're right, Rod, it actually is not in this language here. It's just adding it to the application process.
Okay.
Ms. Patterson?
Would that be included in the animal safety plan?
Yeah, so the animal safety plan language that was added by the ZBA, it seemed like everyone liked that language. It was just approve or review was the reason why that amendment got voted. So if you include the ZBA language, it will include having the veterinarian on call and available to be at the site within 45 minutes. So if you adopt Mr. Wahlberg's motion, that is included.
Mr. Riley?
And you'll have to forgive me because I had left before that happened, but you said that's what happened at that
It is.
event that we attended that day.
And I have the times documented.
That's fine. Yeah, I knew
There within 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Couldn't hear that. As the ordinance currently is, it's they're supposed to be in compliance with the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, which has a requirement that a veterinarian be on site and available on an immediate basis. And if you look at I have a document here pulled up that describes what the veterinarian does. It's a 45-page document. And like I said, they're supposed to be on site, and now we're removing all of that and just going to have a on-call veterinarian. Mr. Riley?
I think we struck that in section 2, correct? I think it's going to be way too hard for, I'm sure the sheriff doesn't have those rules in front of him. And I think when it comes to interpretation of those rules, and the state's attorney, I'm sure will speak to it as well. But I was a big proponent of this, but being in enforcement of this kind of stuff, I think we have to stick a little more local or with our state law. I think trying to adopt something like this is going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough to enforce because it's going to be tough to interpret. I'm wrong on that?
Yeah, no, that was language that was stricken by the ZBA. It's point number 2 on your memo. The ZBA did remove that language from the ordinance that was on advice of staff. Part of the problem was that the regulations of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, the Women's Professional Rodeo Association, the Mexican Federation of Charreria, some of those regulations contradicted each other. So it was impossible to comply with all of them. And we also we were never sure we had the updated copies of those regulations. The sheriff sort of chimed in and said, hey, my guys have no idea what these associations rules are, how to enforce them. So that is language that was removed at the ZPA level, and it was on the recommendation of staff.
Ms. Branson?
I have a question, because if I'm reading this the way, if I think I'm interpreting this the way I think I'm reading it, it leaves tailing in to be allowable. And if that is the case and we approve this way, Mr. Chairman, will you send this to an ad hoc committee so that we can address this issue and work out that issue?
That's in the motion.
That's my intention all along.
I missed that, I'm sorry. It's getting late.
Yeah. No.
It's been a long day.
Got you.
As I've mentioned to all of the board members that I've spoken to on this, there's parts of this I felt that, we're good and I think that we can work with. But if steer tailing is not something that is going to be approved by this entire board, by all means, I will definitely form an ad hoc committee that will have people from each and every organization involved in that. No issue with that whatsoever. So,
Mr. Thornberry.
I spent 2 days in Springfield, and I was told there was going to be legislation on this brought up in Springfield sometime this year, but I couldn't get any definite information on it. I'm hoping it's to outlaw steer tailing altogether, because to me, that's the only thing that makes any sense. I know I've been told by Ms. Patterson here that steer tailing's not that big a deal because if you land in 2 inches of sand or how much it is, it doesn't get hurt. But a lot of these places are not going to do what they're supposed to do, and we all know that to start with. So to have somebody say he's got 2 to 6 inches of sand out there and only have hard pan, once that animal gets hurt, you can't do anything about it except fine him maybe. That doesn't do the animal any good. I think we need to have a veterinarian on site at all times. And I talked to one of the people who have, I'm not going to say he's in charge of these things, but I'm not sure he is on a board for some of them. And they have regulations similar to what we're trying to get in here. And he didn't have any objections at all about some of the things that we're trying to do. Their main concern is getting rid of the rodeos. And if we wanted to get rid of the rodeos, all we'd have to do is start making them pay for everything they do. That's what Winnebago did. They got to have liquor license. They got to have security guards licensed by the state. All kinds of stuff in Winnebago. You have to pay for just about everything. So therefore, there are no rodeos over there. But I still say the main concern here is to keep people and animals safe. And rodeo is not a safe sport because there's just as many contestants get killed at these events as animals. Sometimes more. So any safety measures we can put into this, I don't care how outrageous they sound, it's going to benefit both rodeo people and us.
Ms. Branson.
This ordinance, the way it is written, it is far from perfect. But it is still progress from what we were started with. And as much as I don't like parts of it, I think if we send it back to, if we approve this, we've made progress. We go back to the ad hoc committee. If we can address the issue of the tailing and address the issue of going, whether it's just applying to horses or all animals at that level at the ad hoc committee, then I think we're making progress. And even though it's slow progress, it is progress. And I don't like it the way it is, but I think given the options that we have, I'd rather approve part of it for some benefit and go back to ad hoc and keep moving forward rather than to just vote it down and have it all end tonight.
Mr. Wiltie.
I would agree, taking these issues 1 through 6 as enumerated in the memo and 10 and allowing that gets us at least that much off the table, and those changes in effect when we pass it at the end of the month here. I would say that with respect to the steer tailing or any animal tailing, it's not just the impact area that the animal hits, but it's the action of the pulling of the tail and associated damage to the tail and the hindquarters of the animal is what is my concern. But I do agree that for the purposes of the structure of this, if we can approve 1 through 6 and 10 and get that off and get that done and get a committee set up to jump into these more difficult issues that we don't have consensus on and try to build consensus or make a decision.
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing.
Mr. Riley?
Yeah, I just want to point out too, again, I'm not real happy about that we're not passing all of it, but I look at it this way. We just spent the last 2 hours or so talking about wind and solar, and we were taking our recommendations from what the ZBA told us. And ZBA was very clear in their decision that was recommended to us was to ban the steer tailing, animal tailing, period. So I find it a little strange that we, follow our ZBA because these are people that we appoint to these positions and we trust them to bring the information to us. We're following in one area and we're not following them in another. So just a point I'd like to put out there. But again, I have to agree with what Sherry and Mr. Wiltsey said. I think if we at least get, and this was my intent all along by working on bringing this back to the board, was to, there was some good things in here, move forward with those. Hopefully we can something in the other area, but that will all go back to the ZBA once we do the ad hoc committee. It'll all have to be redone then.
The ad hoc committee determines that they want more changes to the ordinance, then those changes will go through the ZBA process again, but you won't be just starting from scratch. If you adopt some of these changes tonight,
Right.
they'll still be there.
Okay. And I think we have to take that into consideration again. I mean, we're going to send it back to them after another ad hoc committee. Hopefully, maybe there'll be some new information I'm not aware of at this point. Hopefully that will come up and maybe clear up a lot of things. But again, we're relying on these people and these boards to help us along. And that's just my 2 cents on it.
Ms. Patterson?
Can I clarify, Carla, these changes, so I understand that we're adopting them if we vote on them, but if there are things that come up, I still think that there are things that can be tweaked within the things that we're voting on. So as long as those things are brought forward and if they're reassessed through ZBA, they can come back through.
Sure, absolutely. If you guys have other things you want to add when it goes back through this process, yeah, you're not limited to these.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And just so it's clear, obviously, this is going to go to the full board in a couple weeks.
Sure.
Pass it on.
Mr. Thornberry?
When you assign the ad hoc committee, Mr. Riley?
Yes, I would.
I would like to request that the person who is on, I don't know how to say this. The gentleman that we talked to out here that in the parking lot at last meeting, I think he said he was the assistant president or the president of something of their organization. I would like to have him on that that committee.
Okay.
So that he could get an input, he could let us give a better idea of what we're looking at. We say something, he can tell us if it makes any sense to him or not, and he can give us pointers on what we need to do to make them safer. Because the night that I talked to him, he is their association. He's in charge of their association, like Cowboy Association, or Rodeo Association. He said they have an organization like that, and he was an officer on it. I would like to have him there. I mean, he's not going to agree with everything we want to do, but at least he can give us a better idea of which way to go to where we don't create as many problems.
Mr. Riley?
Just to echo off of that, I agree with you 100%. However, I don't think that all of the organizations that operate rodeos in Boone County belong to that association. So that's something that we need to perhaps look, that's something that the ad hoc committee needs to look at as well. Maybe that should be part of the permit process or something. I don't know, we can force anybody to join an association. I don't know. I'm not sure how all that will work. That's something we'll have to work through. But the problem with enforcing those rules, if they don't belong to the association, that association doesn't have any rules, but it might definitely help us guide us along the way.
And you could probably let us know who does and who doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson?
I have a question for our attorneys. If this goes back to ad hoc and we want to add some language that excludes like the 4-H's and the schools from needing these permits and such, can we include such a thing?
We've talked about that a little bit. We don't think, we actually talked to the, title, the director of Boone County 4-H or Melissa.
Extension, yeah.
We talked to Melissa. And based on the conversation that our office had with her, I think we both came away believing that this ordinance does not really apply to anything that 4-H is doing because of the definition of animals in the ordinance. What they do, just generally doesn't involve that many spectators or participants. If it's at the fairgrounds, the zoning ordinance doesn't apply, period, because the fairgrounds was established, their use prior to our zoning ordinance being adopted, and the activities they do that don't occur on the fairgrounds are too small to fall with it. They don't have to get a temporary use permit.
That's very comforting. Thank you.
Mr. Mueller?
So Carlo, I talked to Melissa a little bit, like the definition that we have in there, like on our farm, we have 150 animals. So that obviously that puts us way over the number of how many animals you need for a show. And then if the FFA or 4-H comes out, like we've had up to 20 people come out. So there'd be 20 participants. They're judging the animals. So I'd be showing them on the animals. So the wording in the ordinance says that I would need a permit, an animal show permit. So that's what I think we need to have some wording in there that for educational purposes, it'd be exempt.
I agree.
And we can talk about that a little bit more and find out, get some information from you about what you're doing at your farm and whether or not you think it would fall under this definition. That's absolutely something we can consider.
Mr. Riley?
And just one more thing, just to speak to the crowd. I know we have people here from both sides, the rodeo side and people and the neighbors that have been, diligent at coming to meetings and expressing their opinions and their wishes and their requests and hopes we can get some of this stuff resolved. We're working on it. We're not going to make, I said this from the beginning, we're not going to make everybody happy. I understand that. Again, the tailing issue, I'm still not, it boggles the mind, but that's me, and I have to take my personal opinion out of it. So we'll continue to work on it. I know you folks will continue to make complaints. You folks will continue to call in when traffic is horrendous, if noise is horrendous, and I'm not telling you that you shouldn't do that. So, but we're just trying to get through parts of this. Hopefully we'll come to another ad hoc committee, hopefully having people from all walks of this involved in it. I don't know how many people I can appoint to that committee exactly, but we'll have that discussion later. But I assure you there'll be someone from every organization involved in it.
Okay, so if I could just clarify here quick, the main motion is for the changes as presented by the ZBA. There's been a motion made to amend it with the items off of what's listed as, it's on the screen here, the SA rodeo memo. And it's just number 1. It's removing the words pancheriata. It's removing number 2 up there of having compliance with the regulations of other entities. It's having them have the bibs on. I'm just giving a brief thing here. And letting the sheriff's department, health department, animal services and building and zoning go there. And it has to clean up and the authority to deny and the animal safety.
Number 10, section 10.
So right now, all we're doing is amending what's from the ZBA and with the 1 through 6 and number 10 that's on this sheet here. Ms. Patterson?
Can you, I don't want to beat this to death, but the one thing that I don't remember is I thought that the recycling and waste, like the 24 hours after the event, that we decided not to do that because like if I drive down any road in Boone County, there is trash, beer cans, bottles in the ditches. So for them to be able to gauge that, I mean, again, going back to staff, I thought that that was something that we kind of had a discussion about and decided not to do. Am I wrong?
The language in number 5 came as a result of the discussion the board had. I think it was Mr. Who of course isn't here tonight.
Right.
But he's the one that proposed that.
So it was changed.
And
Okay.
it is in the ZBA.
So it's different than what the original
It is,
was?
yeah, it is.
Okay, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to ask, so I take it somebody's going to then make a motion to.
We already did.
It's already
The
been.
motion and second's already been
Yeah, we're
made
done.
to amend the original motion that was made.
I'm asking a question here. Hold on a second. I take it somebody's going to make an emotion to change change any animal tailing back to horse tailing. Someone's going to make that.
No.
That's not on there.
No.
That's part of the,
That's not.
Yeah, so,
I know, but it's part of the original thing that came from the ZBA.
right, so the official language would be, I move to amend section 4.2.3A1 to increase the number of animal show rodeo permits from 2 per calendar year to 4 per calendar year, to amend section 4.2.3A1A to only prohibit horse tailing, and to amend section 4.2.3A1C to change the requirement that the animal safety plan be approved by a licensed veterinarian. So that leaves all of 1 through 6, and because that came to us from ZBA like that, it changes the 2 items that ZBA passed on to us. They reduced the number of animal shows to 2. Mr. Wahlberg's amendment moves that back to 4 shows per year, and it changes the ZBA's recommendation that deer tailing be permitted or be prohibited. It now just prohibits horse tailing. So it's kind of confusing, but that's the effect of the amendment on the floor right now.
Okay. So he kind of modified number C there.
It is the first option of letter C. I gave 2 options, and it's the first suggested motion language. Am I stating that correctly, Ms. Wahlberg? That's what you intended to do?
Yes, correct, where it says, the animal safety needs to be
Reviewed by a veterinarian. Yeah. So essentially, the board would be adopting what the ZBA did, except for the number of animal shows per year. That will stay at 4. And except for this deer tailing, that will remain, at least right now, we will still allow steer tailing. Otherwise, you're adopting what the ZBA did. Oh, and you're saying that the animal safety plan has to be reviewed by a veterinarian instead of approved. But those are if you pass Mr. Wahlberg's motion to amend, those will be the 3 things you're doing that are different from what ZBA recommended.
Mr. Thornberry?
I'm a little confused about what she's saying. I'm reading. Because item 9 says the ZBA prohibited all animal tailing, and the amendment would have stricken the word animal and replaced it with horse, and that was voted down. So that tells me that all animal tailing is prohibited.
No, should Ms. Mayville just try to discuss it? If you looked at number C on the memo,
Down one more page.
it's not real, it doesn't have it listed out exactly how it is listed for areas, but it doesn't say it's changing the animal tailing, it just says horse tailing will be prohibited. So that's effectively removing any animal pulling, tripping, tailing and heeling.
Was that two same thing, only different?
Mr. Wiltshire.
That's what it says now, is horse tailing. So it's going to change 1 through 6 and 10. And then the committee's going to look at these other more difficult issues.
That's what I'm trying to clarify, because 9 says, the way I'm reading it, we voted 9 down, which means all animal tailing is prohibited. Because the CBA version prohibits all animal tailing. The amendment would have stricken the word animal and replaced it with horse. But that, if you go on down and read here.
That ordinance didn't pass.
Exactly, which means there is no animal tailing per se.
No.
No, it's just as in number C is.
I don't have a C. Mine is strictly.
On the screen up here.
Go down further.
That makes it 2 different options.
No, go down to options. It's like a page or
Yeah,
two
so
later.
I think I can explain a little bit. So, the number 9 is an amendment that was made at the, last board meeting where you discussed this. There was an amendment to, revert back to allow steer tailing. That amendment failed, so it left steer tailing prohibited, but you guys voted down the ultimate motion. So the current state of the ordinance is that steer tailing is allowed. That's the current state of the law in Boone County, because you guys voted down the entire ordinance as amended, and for the last month and a half, we've been operating under the original ordinance. It's confusing because you've got the original ordinance, you've got it as you guys tried but didn't ultimately pass in March, and then you've got it as amended by the ZBA. There are kind of 3 ordinances we're all talking about here. I know, it's confusing.
It is confusing.
Well, there is no such thing as horse tailing, so I don't even know how that got in there.
Yeah, it was in our original ordinance.
It still is.
Horse tailing is outlawed in the state of Illinois, period.
Correct.
Which is why they moved on to steer tailing.
So how this is written under C, is it then horse pulling and tripping?
Yeah.
So it's just not written properly when we're looking at C here. I think that's part of the issue.
Well, I sort of truncated it. So horse tailing, pulling, tripping will be prohibited. Basically, it's just steer tailing that you're adding back in. But horse tailing, tripping, pulling, that's always been prohibited in all parts of the ordinance. If you pass Mr. Willard's amendment, you will be allowing steer tailing again pending the outcome of the ad hoc. Mm-hmm. And it's currently allowed.
Yeah, it's currently allowed.
That's kind of an opinion, I guess, but just because it doesn't say the word steer tailing and anything doesn't mean it's not a cruel act.
That's not.
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, that's not the issue. The issue is that's the language that's currently in effect. And we're not going to touch that one right now. We're going to touch 1 through 6 and 10.
Any other discussion on the amendment that's proposed?
Roll call.
Okay. Want to do a roll call?
Ronnie Riley, yes. Brian Schneider,
Yes.
Dave Wiltsey,
Aye.
Ray Larson,
No.
Brett Mueller,
Yes.
Tom Wahlberg,
Yes.
Alyssa Patterson.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry. Dana Logston,
No.
Sherry Branson,
Yes.
Carl Johnson,
Yes.
Marion Thornberry.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay.
Is there any other amendments anybody wants to propose? Any other discussion? Saying no, let's see here. Okay, if there's no other discussion at this time, we're gonna have you want a roll call or just a voice vote on the amendment as
I think
the original motion as amended?
That where we're at?
No, we just did the amendment.
Correct.
Oh, all right, very good.
If there's no other, we'll check again. Anybody else want to make any amendments to the original motion? Motion as. We'll have, you want a roll call?
Sure. Ronnie Riley, yes. Brian Schneider,
Yes.
Dave Wiltsey,
Aye.
Ray Larson,
No?
Brett Mueller,
Yes.
Tom Wahlberg,
Yes.
Alyssa Patterson,
Yes.
Dana Logston,
No.
Sherry Branson,
Yes.
Carl Johnson,
Yes.
Marion Thornberry.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. County Board. 18th, I think it is. Yep.
Anything on the raffles? No?
Signed them. Yep, all good.
We'll see.
I just wanted to indicate that on the precautionary advice of the state's attorney, since one of those raffles is in Candlewick, it should be noted for the record that I abstain to that raffle.
Make a motion to approve the raffles.
Motion made by Mr.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Mueller. Any discussion on the raffles? So it's just to move them on, we can just have a voice vote?
I don't think we ever approve them. I think they just get signed and move forward.
Right,
You can approve them if you want.
Mr. Wiltsey wanted to abstain from it.
Oh,
Just from the.
Just for the record, he's Candlewick Lake.
fine.
As a vote, aye on all of them.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. To county board.
I do believe we need an executive session tonight for potential litigation. So, I'll make a motion that we go into executive session
Second.
or litigation. Thank you.
Probable and imminent or pending?
Imminent.
Probable and imminent. Second?
Second. Mr. Mueller had a second. Any discussion? Voice vote then. Rodney Riley, yes. Brian Schneider,
Yes.
Dave Wiltsey,
Yes.
Ray Larson,
Aye.
Brett Mueller,
Yes.
Tom Wahlberg.
Yes.
Alyssa Patterson.
Yes.
Dana Logston.